Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast, your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. I am Robert Winfrey. I am your host. On the docket this evening, we have a review of last night. UFC was on ESPN again. They were in the city of Minneapolis, and they had a card that I said on paper looked pretty solid, and turned out in practice was pretty solid. So we'll go over all of that. This coming fight week will be International Fight Week. The UFC is having their next pay-per-view, UFC 239 from Las Vegas, because International Fight Week is always done in Las Vegas. And it's a pretty decent card. It's a really, really solid card in a lot of respects, but it is also International Fight Week. And, well, we can go over a little bit of the history of that from the last couple of years if you're also inclined, but something bad always happens. So we're going to have to be on the lookout for that. And then a little bit of news. I mean, not a whole lot of stuff. The UFC announced some fights. A few cards kind of got finalized. Maybe not bout orders, but specific fights. MMA is now going to be legal in at least France. So we'll go over a few other things. I don't think there's a whole lot of news, but who knows? Crazy stuff has broken as we've been recording this in the past. So I had to break Jeff's heart that one time when Tony Ferguson tore his knee, and we had to talk about that just before we went on air. So crazy stuff. It's a weird sport. But speaking of Jeff, he is back after being off for a couple of weeks for work, illness, etc. So everybody join me in welcoming back Jeff Harris to the program. Jeff, very nice to have you back. Hope you're well.
Yes, that's right. I saw Spider-Man Far From Home. How about it? Welcome back. I'm Jeffrey Harris.
All right, let's go ahead and just jump in.
Time to give this show the class and respect it deserves. Now that my presence can once again grace this podcast, you're all very welcome to have me here.
Let's jump into the main event from last night then. Francis Ngannou defeats Junior Dos Santos TKO 1 minute 11 seconds into the first round. This was a very likely possibility, especially given how Junior chose to fight. This became almost inevitable as that fight wore on the way he was fighting. Junior whiffs on an overhand right. Ngannou gets off angle behind him, cracks him with a bit of a right. He goes down and just is never able to recover because Francis Ngannou is a scary, scary human being. Again, there's a little bit we can get into here technically, but Jeff, I want to give you kind of first crack at this. What was your prediction going into this fight, and what'd you think of the action?
I had Ngannou. It was a good performance. It was a short performance that we've often come to expect from Ngannou. He's definitely over the hump after that Miocic loss, but I'm still just not convinced he's capable of winning the heavyweight title because we've seen him win fights like this before, and I'm just not certain he can go a grueling battle and come out the other side the winner, especially against a cardio machine like Daniel Cormier or Stipe Miocic, who both have, fairly good chins and the wrestling ability to counteract Ngannou's strengths.
Yeah, I definitely think with Stipe, at least, it's rewatch that first. It's one of that fight between Stipe and Ngannou is, I don't think it got the credit it deserved at the time, and I'll include myself in this. But watching it now, that was a really, really impressive strategic game plan and implementation of such by Miocic. He fought very, very well. He did what you have to do against a guy like Francis Ngannou, and a lot of people seemed to have the impression that after that Stipe fight, well, all you have to do is wrestle Francis. And, well, that didn't work out well for Cain Velasquez. It didn't work out well for Curtis Blades. Didn't work out well for a bunch of guys that fought Francis prior to that, because takedown defense is not the easiest thing in the world, but you can prep for it. And if you know it's coming, it's relatively easier. It's much easier to defend than if you don't. Stipe's success came from a good jab, good leg kicks, fakes, feints, and drawing Francis out into overcommitting himself. When you fight anybody with the kind of vicious power that Francis has, and this goes across any striking sport, anytime you're fighting someone who has that kind of power, your best bet is to just make them throw a lot because it takes a lot of energy for them to do it. And you can't be afraid of it. I mean, again, watch. This is what Stipe did so very, very well in their fight. He's clearly respectful of Francis's power, but he's not afraid of it. He engages in the ways he needs to engage. He jabs, he leg kicks, he gets Francis thinking about things, he gets his feet out of position, gets him to overcommit his weight, trying to count when he bites on anything that Stipe would show. Then he would launch his attack, be that, again, another leg kick, some jabs at a different angle, or a double or a single leg, depending on where they were relative to the cage. It was, a brilliant game plan that a lot of fighters in particular seem to have taken the wrong lessons from. And I said last week that if Junior did try to replicate what Stipe did, this was a winnable fight for him. But if he went in trying to just, knock Francis out with an overhand right, he was probably going to lose. Tried to knock Francis out with an overhand right and immediately got clipped with counters. I mean, Francis doesn't have the best skill set if we're talking about technical implementation. I mean, even we watched the finish to this fight.
And Dos Santos, what he did was so not smart because when he did that, he was open as hell.
Yeah, it was a really ugly punch, and it's sadly not the first time.
Sloppy, and Dos Santos has generally been throughout his career one of the better heavyweight boxers of his career. I would say, now granted, he hasn't always shown that. Up until the first loss to Cain Velasquez, I would say he was arguably one of the best heavyweight boxers in MMA in the world. Or is it unfair for me to say that?
Again, like for certain values of boxing, he certainly had a lot of power. He had a very good vocabulary of strikes in terms of his punching offense.
Okay.
The big reason I kind of struggle with calling him a great boxer is, boxing is done with the feet, fundamentally, and JDS has always struggled with footwork and ringcraft.
Here's what I don't get about this shot Dos Santos did. When he threw that big overhand right, Ngannou had his hands up. Like, he was well defended at that point. Like, it just seemed, I don't want to say stupid, it just seemed very almost like I don't know what he was trying to get Ngannou to do there, or if he was trying to get Ngannou to do something, or if he actually thought that punch would land. It did not look like a good strategy at all. It kind of reminds me of that kick Weidman threw against Luke Rockhold. That totally changed the complexion of that fight.
Yeah, that's not a bad comparison, actually. Junior's used that punch in basically that same way in some of his previous fights. He tends to use it. I don't know if he's just trying to, if he has a bad read on his opponent, or if he just is trying to use it as like a space filler. But that's a punch that he's thrown before that it's never bitten him quite as badly as it did here, but it's a punch that he's just whiffed on plenty of times throughout his career. So
I do want to give Ngannou credit because Dos Santos gave him a great opening, and that's all he needed to finish the fight.
Yeah, again, Dos Santos has missed that exact same punch plenty of times and has not really been countered that same way. So,
and this is a game where just the most marginal errors.
4 ounce gloves, man. 4 ounce gloves are so unforgiving.
Yeah,
it is an absolutely unforgiving equipment that we use in this sport as far as that goes.
But does the changes Ngannou's made? Now he's training with Kamaru Usman. They made a big deal out of that last night. Let's be honest about that. I don't know if that was a big difference maker for him or not. It's
not going to hurt.
Maybe. But if he's pushed, do you think he can make it into the deep waters and thrive there this time? I'm not convinced he can.
I would need to see evidence to the contrary. I imagine he could do better than he did in the first Stipe fight, but I don't know that he's. How do I say this? I don't know that the current versions of Francis Ngannou are equipped to come back. I
For
think
example, to anyone who thinks I'm being unfair to Ngannou here, like, you can watch a Max Holloway fight and be fairly confident if it's at featherweight, he'll be okay if the fight goes into the later rounds. You would agree with that, yes?
yes.
And based on the evidence we have, we can't be convinced of the same for Ngannou yet.
At the moment, yes. I think he's slimmed down a fair bit since that Stipe fight. He's
in great shape, no question. I agree.
Yeah. And I imagine it's something he's worked on. If he's not, then his trainers deserve to be fired.
Well, we saw what his trainers did to him in that Stipe Miocic fight.
Also true.
Turned him into a mummy.
That was so bizarre. You
don't know is he still working with the same people now?
A couple of them stayed with him. He still has Dewey Cooper with him, I believe. But he's changed a few around. Okay. So I think he would do better, but I don't know that he's. I think Francis is, let me be clear. This is not a damning condemnation. This is not something that is impossible to overcome. This is not something that means he will never achieve success. He's already achieved a high level of success.
Yeah, for sure.
But I don't think I don't know that he can come back from adversity.
Well,
I'm
not saying definitively he can't either, but let me just say this. Even having seen this performance, if he were to fight Daniel Cormier next, a 40-year-old Daniel Cormier, mind you, or Stipe Miocic, I would still pick both of them to beat Ngannou. And it's mainly it's not because I hate Ngannou. It's just because looking at the skills matchup and looking how they match up physically in an MMA fight, that's just how I lean. Now, I'm not saying my comments are the be-all end-all. I'm wrong. I pick fights wrong all the time. That's just what my gut says. That's what my head says looking at those matchups right now.
Yeah, I think they're bad stylistic for him. I mean, and I haven't really seen a whole lot that would indicate to me that he's addressed the issues and the habits that Miocic was able to exploit.
Right.
Again, Cormier would fight him very differently than Stipe did, I believe. I think Cormier's would be more inclined to take a shot from further out, whereas Stipe did a lot more faking and feinting.
Got underrated power though,
Cormier can crack, especially at heavyweight. And Cormier would also be very likely to engage him in prolonged kind of clinch battles, whereas Stipe was a lot more take the shot, second attempt, and if that doesn't work, I don't really want to engage with him in this proximity.
My other thing about Cormier is he's a grinder. He can overcome adversity. We've seen him overcome adversity.
Yep.
I mean, look at that fight with Anthony Johnson as an example.
He got dropped pretty hard.
He got punched right on his butt and flipped over like Shawn Michaels. And I wouldn't mind seeing either fight, though.
I'm more interested in seeing Ngannou fight Cormier than I am a rematch with Stipe, just because I've seen that, and I don't think that fight would go any differently this time around.
Right, and I mean, it's a possibility if someone gets hurt.
Yeah, and I mean, he's now the number one contender again. I don't think there's a whole lot of dispute there.
And I would say he deserves to be the number one contender because, look, he hit a bad skid, and he's overcome that. Knocked out Cain Velasquez, Curtis Blades, and Junior Dos Santos. So two former UFC champions. And look, Curtis Blades has gotten better. He's a top 10. He's definitively, I think you would agree, a top 10 heavyweight at this point.
Yeah, probably. I think he's still ranked there, and I wouldn't disagree too much.
Fighter, but he deserves to be in the top 10. He's a good fight. Maybe not a great fighter, but he's a good fighter.
Yeah.
So he's earned I would say another title shot at this point.
Yeah, and again, just one thing I'd like to point out here before we move on. In back-to-back fights on ESPN, big ESPN, Francis Ngannou has knocked out Cain Velasquez and Junior Dos Santos in the first round. You and I were both doing this show when those two were the pinnacle of heavyweight MMA.
Right.
And this guy stopped both of them inside of 2 minutes combined fight time.
And let's also be on, like, Dos Santos was having a good run going into this fight.
Very good.
Probably
one of the more improbable career resurgences I can recall.
Probably the best run he's had in years, considering he's 35 years old, had a stretch where he was facing a potential long-time suspension from USADA that was eventually overturned, and he was just very hit and miss for a while. He was looking good lately.
Yeah, he had really kind of refound himself, and
he still can. You know, because he was in there against Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, Francis is in many respects a pretty significant outlier in terms of kind of results and what's achievable. Because, I mean, the power that man possesses is...
It's an equalizer.
Oof, definitely. It's more than an equalizer.
Well, I mean, that's why you can't discount if he were to fight, I think, a Cormier or Stipe. Does he have the power to do that to either of them in the first round? He most definitely does.
Yeah. I mean, that first round between Stipe and Ngannou was...
Yeah.
That was nail-biting stuff.
It was, but I expected... I just thought it was smart money to expect Stipe to weather that storm.
Yeah. And it was. It turned out to be smart money to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, solid enough main event. Again, it went very quickly, but Francis likely the next challenger, assuming there's no weirdness around the upcoming Miocic and Cormier rematch.
And depending on what happens, Cormier might be retiring.
Yeah.
Win or lose after that fight.
He might, so... next up in your co-main event, Joseph Benavidez defeats Jussier Formiga via TKO 4 minutes 47 seconds into the second round.
So this is a little less than 6 years after they fought for the first time, which was in 2013.
Yeah.
It also ended in knockout. That one was in the first round instead of the second.
Yeah, it's a shame they're getting rid of this division. It really is, because this was a really fun fight. I mean, there was a great sequence in the second round.
When are they getting rid of the division? Because Dana White just said they aren't.
I believe Dana White about as much as I believe insert politician. Like
Kamala Harris?
Any of them.
Joe Biden?
Seriously.
Trump.
Any of them on any side of the aisle. They're all full of crap.
Kim Jong-un.
Okay, he's just crazy. We don't count the crazies. No, there was this great sequence in the second round when Formiga, a legitimate black belt with international jiu-jitsu credentials, ducks around standing, gets the back of Benavidez, hits an elevated kind of waist slam mat return, looks to take the back, and the way Benavidez just scrambles through this elite level back take, a legitimate world-class back taker, and never lets him get both hooks in, turns around, gets on top. There's so much great stuff in this division. And it's
Benavidez has done a lot of great things in his career. It's just that massive win has always eluded him.
Yep.
I thought he did pretty amazing things in that the second fight with Dominic Cruz for the WEC Bantamweight title.
Yeah, that's a really great fight for those of you who haven't seen it.
Arguably, he could have won. And I say that because we've seen worse decisions go the other way.
Yeah, there were a couple of them on this card. They were not on this card that I really took issue with. But
Edgar, for example.
At least one of the scorecards from the Edgar Penn fight was ridiculous.
Yes. I still score that fight for BJ, but whatever.
It's been too long since I've rewatched it. I know the 50-45 for Edgar.
Benavidez has been at times, I think, a brilliant fighter.
Absolutely.
He just was never able to win the big one.
Yeah, he's
legitimately top 5 in 2 different weight classes some years back. And I don't think anyone can argue that.
No, there was a time when he was top 5 at bantamweight. That's very true.
He was top 5 at bantamweight when he moved down. I stand by that.
Yeah, that's probably true. I'd have to go back and double check where everyone was historically at that point in time, but I wouldn't argue with it.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, this was a really entertaining fight, and then Formiga had some success. He had a really interesting, it's kind of perpetual right hook that he was able to tag Benavidez with a few times. Anytime they'd get close, Benavidez gets a little bit flappy with his hands, and Formiga was able to kind of cover up through a lot of that, and then always force Benavidez to exit to Benavidez's left, and he was almost always greeted with a right from Formiga when he would exit the pocket. It was a really
is a very skilled, underrated fighter too, I believe.
Yeah,
having the better runs of his career going into this fight as well.
He had a really good run going into this. Yeah, it's a shame he's probably going to get cut now.
I mean, what do you do with this division, though? What do you do with Benavidez?
It's such a. I mean, even if Henry Cejudo was healthy, which he's not, it's still kind of a mess. The fact that he's going to be out for basically the rest of the year.
And he holds a belt at a higher weight class.
With a longer line of contenders.
But Benavidez is the last guy, whether you consider it a legitimate win or not. He's the last guy to beat the current flyweight champion, who is still the flyweight champion.
Yep.
And Benavidez, I mean, he has a winning streak, and he holds a win. He holds a win, the last win over Henry Cejudo.
If Henry Cejudo if there is any way he's going back to 125, he must fight Benavidez. And I mean, the truly sad thing is that if he's not, I don't even think there's not a better fight you can make for the vacant flyweight title than this one.
Here's my thing. Like, Dana White says they're keeping flyweight, but then have they not cut about half of this division?
Over.
Let them go.
Over half. I mean, they've released over I think just if we go back a full calendar year.
Brandon Moreno, right? And he was,
Yeah, Moreno's gone.
But he was a promising young talent, was he not?
Jared Brooks is gone. Eric Shelton's gone. Joby Sanchez is gone. Dustin Ortiz is gone.
Oh,
Ulka Sasaki's gone. I think Pantoja's still around.
Dustin Ortiz is a fun fighter.
Yeah.
What about Tim Elliott?
Bantamweight.
Oh, he's bantamweight now.
Pettis, same thing. Up at bantamweight.
Well, here's my question. Do you give Benavidez the option of moving up and getting a title shot? It wouldn't be ideal, but I'd almost be fine with that.
I'd be okay with it, and in no small part because the next best contender is Aljamain Sterling.
Maybe, or maybe he fights Sterling for the belt, which wouldn't be terrible. And here's why I wouldn't be against it for Sterling. 1, Benavidez has a win over Cejudo. 2, Sterling lost to Marlon Moraes. So it wouldn't be a bad feather in his cap.
No, I mean Sterling and Peter Yan are making noises at each other right now. So I think you could maybe do that fight and have Benavidez fight Cejudo for the bantamweight belt, and then just have Sterling and Yan be your number one contenders bout.
I feel for Benavidez because he deserves another title shot.
He deserved
comfortably deserved one before he lost to Pettis too.
Yeah. Well, look, he deserved he technically speaking deserved a third shot at Demetrius Johnson.
Right.
It just never materialized, which was kind of a shame because I loved their first fight, good back and forth affair, and then, man, that second fight that was a brutal knockout from DJ.
Done. Benavidez to me is probably he's like one of those top 10 fighters to never win a major title.
Yeah, him and. Even Cowboy. No, Cowboy never won a WEC. Benavidez might be the best. I mean, him and Cowboy, I think, are probably neck and neck for best fighters to never win a UFC title. Again, Formiga, I don't know. We'll see. If the UFC...
It's a good fight, though. Even though it's a pretty much a dead or dying division.
Yeah, it's an absolute... I mean, they don't even have 15 fighters in that division. The UFC does not have 15 fighters to fill out their rankings for flyweight.
I just, Dana White just needs to stop feigning about this and just say we're closing up the division. We tried.
Maybe we'll try again later.
All right, I'll take that. And Cejudo is the last flyweight champ. He's retiring the flyweight belt and remains the bantamweight champion. I mean, look, that's a good legacy for Cejudo, at least. He's already pretty much got the biggest set of balls on the planet right now.
Up there.
I mean, I think he should probably be fighting Cormier for the title of champ huge balls.
Cormier would squish him.
Okay, but Cormier doesn't have an Olympic gold medal. No,
he doesn't. And Cejudo's attempt to rejoin the Olympic team after that run was a miserable failure.
Cejudo's he's got a gold medal at least.
He does. Yeah, it's a crying shame that Cormier's body shut down on him the way it did his second Olympics.
Also, whether you like it or not, Cejudo beat the one guy who beat him before, which Cormier was also not able to do.
Also true. Well, one of the guys. He hasn't beaten Joseph Benavidez again yet, but you'd think he'd want that back. I mean, he made a point of getting the DJ win back, but anyway.
I mean, right now, well, look, Cejudo right now he's in the catbird seat right now. He's the one who has the power right now. Even though I'm
to the extent that any fighter does, I suppose.
Well, as much as I stump for Benavidez, he has no negotiating power here.
That's very true.
And I pull for him.
I agree with you.
And I've been a fan of Benavidez for years.
Yeah. Again, you and I were both watching him when he was in the WEC promotion. I mean,
so
we've seen a lot of Joe B.
I've interviewed him for the website.
Yeah, he's a good interview. He's a nice guy. So I hope that's what'll happen. But I mean, with Cejudo out again, you don't even have another fight you could really make for like either an interim or the vacant title. It just doesn't exist right now. All right. Next up, Damian Maia defeated Anthony Rocco Martin via majority decision. This is erroneously listed here. There was one 28-28 scorecard, which had it a draw, which was my score, and then two 29-28s in favor of Maia. Under the new rules, which we were under last night, I'm not sure how you can rule the third round only a 10-9 in favor of Martin. And again, this is under the old rules. Yeah, sure. I can accept that it only would have been a 10-9. There's a change in the language around your scoring criteria under the new rules, specifically around how one scores a 10-8 round. It now says like you have to win it by a wide enough margin rather than, a near finish or utter domination. Damian Maia achieved no positional dominance at all in round 3 and landed no strikes at all in round 3. And look, I'd accept only a 10-9 if Martin did not do those other things. Martin landed on him pretty consistently, wobbled him at least once, rather badly, and had his back for a brief period of time. I mean, granted, it's Damian Maia, so he immediately reversed into guard, but if we're not going to actually follow the new scoring guidelines and criteria, then what the hell are we doing? That baffles me. That genuinely baffles me to have what I believe a superior rule set in place in a lot of ways. Certainly when it comes to your scoring criteria, and to just blatantly ignore it. It's absolutely ridiculous. That under the new scoring criteria, that third round's a 10-8. And the fight's a draw. And yeah, maybe that sucks. But that's what it is. The first two rounds clearly go to Maia. He's able to get Martin down. He's able to get good position on him. Not able to really mount a ton of tremendous offense, but it's clearly enough in both cases to win the round. Rather, the second round less clearly, but the first round clearly. Second round, again, goes to him without controversy, but more competitively. And then he just kind of takes the third round off, which, fine, don't put yourself in a dangerous position. I'm okay with that. But if you don't do anything and your opponent does, good work under this scoring system, that's a 10-8. If you win it by a wide enough margin, there's absolutely no reason to think that the margin of victory Martin achieves in that third round does not rise to that level. But, I can stand here and complain about judging all day long. It's not actually going to change anything. Not going to stop me from doing it on occasion. For Maia, this is 2 in a row, but I don't know, man. I mean, Maia's just kind of treading water. He's 41. He's not going to get another shot at the belt. He's lost to the top 3 guys in the division, clearly. I mean, those were not close fights. Woodley, Covington, and Usman all beat him clearly. I mean, granted, the Covington fight was weird just because Covington actually got outstruck by Damian Maia for, I think, the whole first round, basically. But after that, Maia's cardio failed. And the Usman fight, was also not close. Sucks for Martin, who was on a really solid run. This was a step up in competition for him, and in fairness to his position, he acquitted himself rather well. He got in bad positions, but never panicked. Never let Maia establish anything approaching the control he really needs to get his game working. And fought very well in the third round. So, again, I give him credit. I give Maia credit for, kind of gutting into that second when he had a couple of rough spots, but was able to still force his game. And, for being a 41-year-old man out there, still taking it to the younger up-and-coming generation, give Maia some credit too, but the fight was just kind of there as far beyond that. All right. Jeff, you have any thoughts on this one?
Snooze fest.
All right. Vince Pichel defeated Roosevelt Roberts via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. Roberts had a good first round, but then after that, Pichel found some kind of angle of attack in the second. I have to rewatch the fight to really pick up on it in more nuance, but he was able to find an angle. Like, he got a couple of decent leg kicks in, was able to find an avenue to close distance reliably, and got Roberts down. And getting him down kind of in the open space away from the fence allowed him to really kind of work his top game. And Roberts, while he has good counter wrestling against the fence, in open space without the fence to lean against, that's a whole different ballgame. And once they kind of got away from that barrier that he could utilize, he struggled a lot more. Decent enough win for Pichel. Roberts is still a guy with a lot of promise. I mean, I'm not calling him a busted prospect yet or anything. This was a step up in competition against a rugged veteran that has a style that we all thought, well, I thought, would give him problems. I think I picked Pichel, actually. But, again, not a bad fight. There's not a lot of bad fights on this card all the way around. So, Jeff, thoughts on Pichel and Roberts?
Nope.
All right. Let's see. Drew Dober defeated Marco Polo Reyes via TKO in the first round. This is what happens when a brawler with power in the form of Reyes runs up against a technically superior striker with good power himself in Dober. Just Dober had his number basically the whole time. That straight left he used to finally put him down was a thing of beauty. And short fight ended 1 minute and 7 seconds into the first round, but some decent action for as long as it lasted. Let's see. You got anything on that one?
It was a good finish, man. It's a fun fight.
Let's see. Alonzo Menafield knocked out Paul Craig with punches 3 minutes 19 seconds into the first round. Paul Craig spun too many times. Like, I appreciate a good spinning attack, but you have to use them judiciously, because the more you use them, the easier they are to counter. Menafield read a wheel kick, moved in close, off-balanced Craig, and then crushed him with a right hand as he was on his back. A few more punches, but I mean, that was all over after that first punch. That was a pretty brutal finish from Menafield, quite frankly. But, I mean, Paul Craig does some interesting stuff. He just, I don't know. He has decent kicks, but he's a very kind of slow fighter, and not everyone can be very fast. I mean, you just have to learn how to work with it. He's got a good guard. He's got a really good bottom game, but Menafield was very studious about avoiding prolonged grappling exchanges with Craig because he knew that's not where he had the best opportunity to succeed. So, again, credit to Menafield, who's now, I think, 9-0 with 2 wins in the UFC. Both of his finishing sequences have come off of countering an opponent's ill-advised spinning attack because he knocked out Vinicius Mejia, basically different, but off of kind of the same kick. He slipped around to the side and then just clobbered him. All right. Jeff, you got anything for this one?
Not really.
All right. That was your main card. So for the prelims, Ricardo Ramos defeated Journey Newson via unanimous decision, 30-27 across the board. Newson has a chin on him, man. He got hit with a brutal spinning elbow in the 3rd round. And, I mean, he didn't even go down. He went down to a knee, but he got back up and was moving very, very quickly. I mean, Ramos just the better fighter all the way around, and Newson looks like a more natural flyweight than bantamweight. But credit to Newson, who came in and put up a fight on very short notice. Not very short. 2 weeks, I think, notice. Eric Anders knocked out Vinicius Mejia in the 1st round with punches. I don't really have anything for this. This was what we all expected. Vinicius Mejia is not a good striker. In fact, he's an actively bad striker. And he couldn't get the fight down, and then Eric Anders just clobbered him with a couple of lefts. Anders really needs to develop his right hand. I mean, he's a southpaw, so his power comes from the left, but his right hand just doesn't do much of anything. He's really got to educate that hand a little bit. It would serve him very, very well. Late stoppage on this fight, too, from the ref. See, Jared Gordon defeated Dan Moret via unanimous decision, 230-27s, 129-28. Not a bad little scrap here. At light heavyweight, Dalcha Lungiambula defeated Daquan Townsend via knockout in the 3rd round. Considering Townsend took this fight on very short notice, like the same week, because this was supposed to be Lungiambula and Justin Ledette. Townsend acquitted himself well. Looks more like a middleweight. I think they said that was his natural. That's where he competes more because he was not nearly as thick as Lungiambula, despite being much taller. I mean, again, 2 guys making their debuts. Decent enough light heavyweight fight, but I'm probably going to forget it tomorrow. Amanda Hebos defeated Emily Whitmire via rear naked choke in the 2nd round. I mean, decent enough comeback from Hebos. Whitmire, I think, took the 1st round. And then just might have been Hebos took in the 1st, actually. I'd have to double check my notes. The fight did not stick out to me. Good finishing sequence from Hebos, though. Got a good takedown, good back take, and then was able to lock up the choke very quickly once she got there in the 2nd round. In the 1st round, she struggled with it, but got it in the 2nd very quickly. And then kicking everything off, Maurice Green, the Crochet Boss, which is a really cool nickname, actually, defeated Junior Albini via TKO in the 1st round, and Junior Albini's UFC career goes bye-bye. Pretty decent stuff. These two had a pretty wild fight. It was on the sloppier side at times, but there were momentum shifts. It ended quickly. It's basically, this is kind of the ideal low-level heavyweight fight in MMA. It's not boring. It goes quickly, and there's no there's no dispute to the finish. Green really, really slick with his hands. Much straighter punches than Albini. The only times he got clipped were when he got a little over-aggressive looking for a finish, and Albini just kind of swung back at him. But Green, did some decent stance switching. Found a couple of good straight punches. A really good kind of 1-2 is what ended it. Albini's lack of head movement really cost him because he thought he was safe, and because he had his guard up, and because he didn't move his head, Green just kind of threaded the punch around the guard, cracked him behind the ear, dropped him and was able to finish him off. So, pretty solid win for Green, who's probably approaching heavyweight prospect territory in terms of MMA competition. He was a decorated kickboxer for a while earlier in his career. So, again, his MMA game is coming along, and might turn into somebody worth really paying attention to going forward. All right, Jeff, any burning desires from the prelims? Because, again, there weren't really too many bad fights, but I don't know how much of this is really going to stick with me.
Were you as surprised as I was when Eric Anders finally won a fight?
No, because Vinicius Moreira is a terrible striker.
But it's Eric Anders.
Yeah, he had a bit of a rough stretch, but, he arguably... There's an argument for him winning the fight with Theodorou. I don't subscribe to it, but it exists.
Also, he has a loss on his record to Elias Theodorou.
Yeah, I know. But, this is... Again, Vinicius Moreira is not a good striker. He's very, very bad at it, in point of fact. Great grappler, but struggles to really force the issue. And when he couldn't against Anders quickly... this was always going to be how that fight went. I'm not sure how much he's going to be able to replicate that success going forward because there's issues he really has to iron out in his game. But against this level of opposition, I kind of expect him to win, actually.
That's all I had.
All right. Thanks to everyone who followed along with my live coverage or read my report after the fact. Always appreciative of you guys supporting my work in whatever way you do. Let's move on to UFC 239 then, because here it comes. The UFC, again, for International Fight Week 2019. UFC 239 is the marquee event. This week we'll also host, again, a big, kind of meet and greet with the fans, the Hall of Fame induction ceremony, et cetera, et cetera. So the UFC always tries to put together really good cards for whatever event they're hosting. Again, usually it's kind of as close as they can get to 4th of July weekend. And this main card, on paper, is really good. Might be terrible in practice, but on paper, it's pretty solid. The main event, Jon Jones looking for another defense of his title against Thiago Santos, who is a scary human being. Now, I really struggled, I think, when Anthony Smith was fighting Jones, just trying to find any sort of avenue that I thought Smith would be able to have success against Jon Jones in. And believe it or not, I don't have that same problem necessarily with Thiago Santos.
Smith also froze like a deer in the headlights in front of Jon Jones.
True. And Jones fights in a way to facilitate that freezing very, very easily. He's made, I don't mean this disparagingly to Anthony Smith. He's made much better.
So did Anderson Silva.
Yeah. If Thiago Santos poses a danger to Jon in a couple of ways. One is just raw power. Now, Jon's... Go ahead.
I agree.
The other thing that Santos brings is a little bit of wildness. And Jon is a tremendous study of his opponents and of the sport. He does a lot of tape study. He's very, very good at breaking you down analytically.
Not just that, he's also good at turning your strengths against you and turning your strengths into a weakness.
Yeah.
Remember, he out-wrestled Daniel Cormier.
He did.
He shut down Daniel Cormier's wrestling. He outboxed Glover Teixeira.
He out-dirty boxed Glover Teixeira, and the clinch has always been Jon's best attribute. You could argue where it is now, but for the majority of his career, the clinch has been his best area.
Elbows, his offensive elbows.
Yeah. Now, And the reason I bring that up is just because if you get a wilder fighter like Santos against a very analytical fighter like John, that tends to favor the analytical fighter, but it does also leave openings that if you just don't expect anything, when you're not expecting something crazy to happen, something crazy happens. And Thiago Santos has a little bit of that. He's also, again, Thiago Santos is a bruiser of a human being. He's got power. He kicks. He punches. He's willing to fight. He's willing to grind. And is, again, just a very, very punishing style of opponent.
He's also, other than Jones, he's the last man to beat Anthony Smith.
Yeah, and he stopped Smith with a body kick, as I recall.
It's a fight of the night performance.
Now, that said, I'm picking John Jones because I don't have a reason to pick against him here. But there are avenues for Santos to be successful.
Yes, I agree, and I'm also picking John.
Probably via decision again. I imagine he's just going to spend the first couple of rounds either forcing clinches or kicking the knee of Santos.
Have we ever seen Santos fight a really tough technical wrestler like John Jones?
There's not too many people like John.
No, but a guy with his level of wrestling. I don't think we have.
Nah, I don't think so either. I mean, who would be the closest on his resume that you could come? Even, jeez.
Maybe Blachowicz? He's decent there.
Blachowicz is decent there, but
Manawa is a striker.
Manawa was a striker. Anders is a striker. Kevin Holland was a sacrificial lamb. David Branch knocked him out.
Smith, I wouldn't call a wrestler.
Hermanson's a pretty good wrestler, actually. Different style than John, but that's probably the closest. Unless we want to go like in the Wayback Machine and, when Elias Theodorou was just grinding people.
Hermanson is good, don't get me wrong. He's having a good run right now, but he hasn't made it to John's level.
No.
I mean like really elite level.
I expect John to win.
Like a Weidman level, a Cormier level, Velasquez. Yeah. I don't think he has. And I don't think he'll... That's another thing I don't think Santos is ready to deal with. Takedowns, grappling, which John has as well.
Yeah, I expect John to kind of get him against the fence at some point or another, get him down kind of with that either knee tap or a single leg, similar to how he does. He got Smith down with it a couple of times. The takedown that basically led to the finish of the fight against Gustafsson in their rematch.
I forget, didn't he take down Smith at some point?
A couple of different points, yeah.
Yeah. Like he didn't do a whole lot, but he had no...
Well, Smith did a really good job in terms of not letting John ever really get his hands together.
Right. But John was still able to get him down.
Yeah, again, there were a few times he was able to, and then there was one barrage. I can't remember if it was the third. I think it was the third round.
And Gustafsson in the rematch, right?
Yeah.
And Gustafsson, well, I wouldn't call him a wrestler. Like he's a decent grappler.
I mean, he doesn't have amateur wrestling credentials, but if you look at Gustafsson's grappling success in MMA, it was quite high.
All things considered. So,
look,
Santos might be able to deal with that, but it's just that we've never seen him do it against a fighter of John Jones's caliber.
And I mean, John could also could keep the fight standing the entire time and still win. Just, make Santos miss a lot and punish him for it.
Possible. That's what he did to Ovince St. Preux.
Yeah.
That was a boring fight.
Well, John's also kind of at a phase in his career when he doesn't care if he wins boring.
I mean,
there were a lot of people unimpressed with the Smith fight. And in fairness,
it wasn't a good fight, but that was also on Smith too.
Yeah.
So Smith didn't really do anything, and John Jones didn't really just have to engage him. Smith didn't really try to engage and really try to win the fight at all.
Yeah, and briefly, credit to Smith for acknowledging this that same point when he's talked about that fight.
Yeah. I mean, he rebounded, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be a hard sell for him to fight. If he gets to that point again, it would be a hard sell to get a rematch with John Jones. Someone else would have to win the belt, I believe.
I'm in agreement with you there. But
I don't dislike Anthony Smith. I'm just being realistic.
And we say that about fighters we like all the time. If they get to that level and then the fight goes in such a way that they just like, there's no question about the outcome, about the finish or the decision or whatnot, and the fight itself was just not entertaining enough to warrant a rematch. It sucks, especially if it's a fighter you like, but that doesn't change reality.
Right.
So again, got Jones, but if you don't mind gambling a little bit and you have a bit of spare money, and you don't mind losing, I mean, I wouldn't bet on Santos, but
you want to make what do you call it, a prop bet or just like a throwaway bet?
Yeah, if you've made your money for the night and just kind of want to, there's long odds, but here's $100 and let's just see what happens, kind of thing.
It doesn't happen often, but if you're a gambler, sometimes it pays off, like the Rousey versus Holly Holm fight.
Or what was the other one? There was, I can't remember if it was, I think it was the the Greenville event or 238? It might have been 238 that had just a string of upsets numerically. It's either that or the Greenville card that just like, okay. I think it was Greenville actually, because I think Randy Brown was, I know Moicano was favored. I think DeChirico, like there was just several of those fights that were just, I think that's why there's gambling.
Yeah, I'm not picking or favoring an upset here, but Santos has good things going for him. He is a good striker. He is scary, and he has deadly knockout power. And look, he's done very well for himself in the UFC.
Very.
But now that he's at this point, we also don't know how he's going to deal with being put in there with John Jones. And a lot of
really good guys have just struggled. I mean, that's how great John is,
A lot of guys have talked a good game going into fights with John, too, and just wilted.
Yep. Your co-main event is another title fight, this one for the women's bantamweight title. Amanda Nunes looks to collect the final soul of a former UFC women's champion in any of the divisions she's competed in when she fights Holly Holm. I need a really compelling reason to pick against Amanda Nunes at this point. And I like Holly, but she does not offer it.
I think if Holly Holm wins this fight, she will have, I guess not but one of the worst UFC title records ever.
I mean,
she will have lost more UFC title fights than Uriah Faber.
Yep. I mean, I forget where I heard it on Twitter. It might have been Jack, or a podcast. It might have been Jack Slack. I want to properly attribute this. But, Holly is kind of the female Uriah Faber. They shoehorn her into title shots.
Other than the fact that she beat Ronda Rousey, she beat the woman who was ruling the entire sport of women's MMA. It beat her spectacularly. She has lost every single UFC title contest she has been in after that.
Yep.
She lost her first. And this is why all the kind of the fallout of the Rousey loss made me so angry. It made me even angrier because her first title defense was a loss to a woman Ronda had beaten twice.
Cleanly twice. Those were not close fights.
Right. And people acted like, oh, Ronda was never good. She never faced real competition. She never blah, blah, blah. All the stupid garbage you expect when a top fighter loses. Whether you like it or not, she lost to Jermaine Durandame, and then she lost an underwhelming fight to Cyborg, where she did not get her clock clean by Cyborg. She just didn't really do anything. She didn't do anything especially when she was able to neutralize Cyborg, which makes me even angrier.
Yeah, again, I need a reason to pick against Amanda. Amanda is an exceptional talent.
I maintain if Holm loses here, she will be the biggest one-hit wonder this sport has ever seen. The biggest. Bigger than Matt Serra. I don't care what you say, Robert.
I'm not going to argue with you.
Because she will have lost way more title fights than Matt Serra if she loses here.
Oh yeah, by a wide margin. I mean, Matt Serra went 1-1 in title fights.
Exactly.
Went 0-1 against Matt Hughes, which is hilarious.
This would be 1-4.
Yeah, which is just oh god, that's again. Look, I said it was ridiculous that they shoehorned Faber into at least 3 of his title fights.
Holly Holm has had success. Let's not deny it. She became a 2-sport champion. Came in here, knocked out Ronda Rousey. A fight practically no one picked her to win.
I didn't. Felt like a moron afterward.
I didn't either. But let's be honest, she did not look that good going into that fight. She didn't look like a threat to Rousey. And you know what? And I could be wrong, but she does not look like a threat to Nunes.
Not really.
Nunes has beaten Rousey, beaten Cyborg, beaten Miesha Tate,
beaten Jermaine Durandamy, beaten Valentina Shevchenko.
Her last loss was to Kat Zingano. Granted, that was almost 5 years ago. But, I mean, so she's not unbeatable. I'm not saying she's unbeatable. But she has distinguished herself more than any other woman in her division. And she's
either of her divisions.
Well,
she doesn't have a real body of work at featherweight, but considering the only featherweight was Cyborg.
You want to classify the Cyborg Memorial open weight division. This fight is at bantamweight, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Holm she's not like a one-hitter quitter.
Not with her fists.
She is a good kickboxer, right? I'll give her that. She has trouble. I feel like she has trouble in deep waters. And when the fight's not going her way. And she tends to rely on she relies on wall and stall a lot if the fight isn't going her way. I don't think that's going to work against Amanda Nunes.
No, that will almost certainly not work against Amanda.
I feel like Amanda's better in the clinch.
Yeah.
Better on the ground.
Almost certainly better on the ground. I'd be shocked if Holm has any real success in grappling with her.
Other than Holm maybe kind of trying to outpoint her and game plan her to death, I just don't see how Holm wins this.
If Nunes is recklessly aggressive, Holm can kind of replicate what she did to Rousey because that's what a lot of her game plan relies on. Or
if she gasses and fades in the later rounds, which has happened before, not a lot, but it has almost cost her certainly against Kat Zingano, and it almost got, excuse me, I'm still technically sick, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It almost cost her against Shevchenko in the first fight.
Almost cost her in the second fight too.
Now
she didn't slow as badly, but same principle.
Now, granted, she's clearly worked on that, and it's not looked to have, but it has been a problem before for her. But look, Holly Holm has also struggled in the later rounds, and I think that's undeniable. Look at her fight with Shevchenko, her fight with Ronda May, her fight with Miesha Tate that she was winning.
I think the Tate Oh god, the brain
The
fart she had
Pennington,
against Tate.
the Pennington fight, where I did not care for her performance at all in that fight. So, just
Now,
saying.
again, I need a really clear-cut reason if I'm going to pick against Amanda Nunes, and I don't have it here.
And I don't dislike Holly at all. I just think she has a very specific skill set.
Yep.
It's done well for her in MMA, and she got matched up against the champion because UFC didn't want to book Tate versus Ronda the third time.
There was no reason to book it the third time, in fairness.
All right, but Tate was arguably the number one contender. And Holm had
only because the rankings are
Holm was
stupid.
undefeated in 2-0 in the UFC at that point. And both of those wins were not garbage, but they weren't good fights.
No, they weren't. They also weren't against a really elite level of opposition. I mean, she beat what? Marion Renault and Jessica, Pennington, right?
Right. And by split decision.
Was the Pennington fight her debut?
Yes.
Okay.
So she had an easy path to the title, let's be honest.
Again, the division wasn't great at the time.
No.
But again, she was in a division that was not great. She capitalized on the opportunity.
Yeah.
And again, it happens. It happens all the time in divisions.
It worked out well for her. I just think Amanda has far surpassed her everywhere.
Pretty much, yeah.
Her skill set.
I mean, Amanda's
opposition, performance level.
Amanda's like the hardest. Amanda might be the hardest punching woman in the sport. I mean, right. She hits so ridiculously hard.
I agree, though. If Nunes were to get reckless or sloppy, Holm could take advantage of it because she's been able to do that too. So
yeah, I just don't see Nunes getting all that reckless or sloppy.
I don't see that happening here, but we'll see.
I expect Nunes to win, and sadly, I think that's probably going to mark the end of her career.
Oh, here we go.
I mean, Nunes has talked about this maybe being her last fight because
wouldn't surprise me.
What's left for her, and in all seriousness, what's left for her to do? She's a simultaneous champion. If she beats Holly, she will have beat every bantamweight and featherweight champion the UFC has ever had, and holds two wins over their flyweight champion. Like, unless she really wants to
break the title defense record.
That would be it. That would be the only other thing she could try to do.
When you do that, you're still. I mean, it's a risk. There's no guarantee you'll be able to do that because look, fighters.
Fighters sometimes you just run up against someone who's got your numbers. Sometimes you just slip on a banana peel.
Anderson Silva got unseated, and we never thought that was going to happen. So it's.
I mean, Andy Ruiz Jr. bested Anthony Joshua a couple of weeks
ago. Just by process of elimination, it's bound to happen at some point.
Yeah.
So to me, that would be the one. If she wanted to stick around, that would be the one thing. Because if she wins here, that would be her fourth title defense at bantamweight. And Ronda has, 5? Ronda Joanna?
I think so.
Tied it. Or did Joanna not tie the record? I forget.
I think Joanna tied it. I don't think she broke it.
Right. Well, I mean, even if she ties it, that's still pretty good company. I mean, and plus, considering she already beat Ronda. Yeah. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. So Joanna had 5, and I believe did Ronda have 5 or 6?
I think Ronda had 5 because she came in as champion. So It was Carmouche, Tate,
in there, McMahon,
Correia, McMahon. Who am I forgetting?
So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, so Ronda has 6.
Oh, who am I forgetting with Ronda?
Correia? David? Oh, Alexis Davis.
I'm forgetting Davis. Yeah. And I think she had one other that I'm forgetting, but
so Joanna fell short of time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, plus considering she's featherweight champion and Cyborg wants a rematch, it would if she were to win here, it would take her quite a while just to tie that record and break that record if she could even do it. Because time catches up with everyone, and you never know when it's going to happen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, so I think we can move on to Masvidal versus Askren now.
This is a really good fight, actually. Yeah, Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren.
I'm picking Askren.
I'm leaning towards Askren, but
it's a bad matchup. I think it's a bad matchup for Masvidal.
I don't know. Masvidal has a pretty decent record of being able to deal with wrestlers.
Yeah, like Jake Ellenberger.
Well, I mean, sure, there was that.
What it did to him.
I don't know, man. I still accept the argument that he won that fight.
It was not a good fight, though.
If we're talking just like in terms of raw
Darren Till's not a wrestler.
No, but he stopped guys like Pat Healy, who was a much more dogged wrestler. Michael Chiesa.
That was forever ago.
Sure, but it still happened.
Lost to Iakenta.
He didn't lose that fight. The judges
lost to Benson Henderson. Lorenz Larkin.
Yep. God, Larkin, man. What a weird guy.
He is probably Jake Ellenberger. Ha ha ha.
No, I don't think that's it. I'm
picking Ben Askren. I'm sorry.
No, wait a minute. You really think that the best Masvidal's best win is Ellenberger?
The best wrestler.
Oh, best wrestler.
Wrestler.
So I misheard you there.
Wrestling background and skill set.
That might be accurate. I mean, in fairness, he also smashed Ellenberger even prior to he was smashing him before the weirdness with the fence. Now, I'm picking Askren too.
This is the type of fight Masvidal comes off an amazing win, looks like $1 million, and then he loses a fight like this, and he's going to lose. I'm sorry. Sorry, Dana White. Sorry, Ben. Sorry, UFC fans. George Masvidal. This isn't going the way you want it to.
Okay.
Masvidal is beatable, and he's always been beatable.
Yeah, especially if his biggest problem, and he's acknowledged this, has always been his mentality.
He's inconsistent.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to anyone talk about him at all when it comes to his actual skills or his abilities, he's legitimately top of the heap, but he can't always put it together on fight night, which is when it matters.
It's why when he comes so close and he gets booked into these big fights, he comes up short. I mean, the Maia fight almost could have been a title eliminator for him.
Was
great.
Oh, yeah. Whoever won that fight was because Maia got his title shot off the back of that.
Right.
And frankly, had one of those other two judges seen it for Masvidal and Woodley's a really interesting fight.
Here's my point. Masvidal is a banger. He's an exciting fighter. He's a fun fighter to watch, but he doesn't have that skill set, or he doesn't have the ability to put it together and get him over that hump to become that higher elite level of athlete. I don't see it. And I'm not saying Ben Askren has it either, but Ben Askren has a skill set that I think is going to be a nightmare for Masvidal, and he's not going to overcome it.
If Masvidal ever gets his back on the fence, he's in real trouble. He has to keep this in open space, and he has to keep things at a distance he's comfortable with. Because look, Ben Askren's striking is absolutely not good.
And I'm not a big Askren fan, but it's fun to see someone get one over on Dana White now and again.
It really is.
Like he openly trolls Dana White. And it gets to Dana White. It does.
Oh, I assume it does.
And Barrett. Yeah, because Dana White was like, "Yeah, I want to book that Lawler rematch," and Askren's like, "Pass, no, I'm not going to play." And he didn't.
No, which is fair. Like you're not required to accept that on the fight, any individual fight that's offered. And if Askren didn't want to do it again,
and you know what, I people complained about that finish so much, but I had no problem with that stoppage. I'm sorry. So
I mean, in hindsight, it's not a good stoppage, but in real time, you can understand it, and that's how all these decisions are made.
Whatever. So good on you, Askren. You're gonna win.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Askren, but this fight has some pretty serious potential. Next up, we have the light heavyweight debut of Luke Rockhold as he fights Jan Blachowicz. Like, Blachowicz is a largely underappreciated guy, but
Then he ran into Thiago Santos.
And in fairness, he put up a good fight against Santos before he got finished. I mean, he was in the fight.
He's having the best run of his UFC career.
Yep. And unfortunately, I think he's a bit of a he's not a gimme, but
he's a high-level journeyman is what I consider him to be.
And I fully expect Luke Rockhold to beat him.
My concern is just Luke Rockhold adjusting to a higher weight class.
That's a thing.
He hasn't fought in over a year, so ring rust, cage rust. And he's a lot older. He's spent a lot of time on the injury shelf just not fighting. And he's 34 now. He is old in the sport now. By your definition, Robert. I'm very excited about the prospect of him fighting at 205 and how he does here. I think his body and his physique is well suited to 205. I think you would agree.
Oh, yeah. Luke Rockhold is an enormous human being.
He's huge.
He's what, 6'4", 6'3"?
I'm not saying he's the perfect fighter to match up with and beat John Jones, but he'd be an interesting fight for John Jones. I would like to see that, but it depends. He's got to be able to beat guys like Blachowicz.
Yeah,
and guys on this level, an Anthony Smith level, a Thiago Santos level. So we'll see.
Yeah, I expect him to win here. I think he's a better striker, better kicker than Blachowicz. Much better grappler. And Blachowicz is a good grappler.
He is a good grappler. I'd say it's probably one of his stronger attributes, but let's be honest. Rockhold, I mean, his run at middleweight, he was no slouch on the ground.
It's Rock. I mean, he gained a bit of steam because he figured out he was a really powerful kicker, but grappling is where he kind of made his bread and butter. He
smashed Machida on the ground. Smashed.
Oh, yeah. That was brutal.
Submitted Bisping in their first fight. Even though I thought he lost
mauled Weidman on the ground once it got there.
He lost the fight. He did an excellent job of neutralizing Jacare's grappling work in their first fight. In 2011.
Yeah, Jacare could not get anything going in that fight for a long time.
Right. And to me, I think to be able to do that against Jacare, who's probably one of the best grapplers in this sport, you have to be a pretty good grappler yourself to be able to do that.
Yeah, Rockhold on the mat I think that's where he's at his best, is if he's in top position on the ground.
That's where he beat Weidman. That's where he won the title.
And I think he'll beat Blachowicz here. I mean, again, I don't have anything against Blachowicz. I think he's a bit underappreciated relative to what he's achieved and how good he is. But I think he's here to be a good, higher level test for Rockhold in this division, and it's one I think everyone expects.
Here, he's back in the running.
That's true.
It would probably be the single biggest win of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his next biggest would be what, Krylov maybe, or the Manuel rematch. I don't know, one of those two. All right, and kicking off the main card,
hot opener.
Diego Sanchez is still alive, and will be fighting Michael Chiesa.
Diego Sanchez is still alive and on a 2-fight winning streak in the UFC.
In 2019.
2019.
Coming off of his first win.
Oh my God.
His first finish since Luigi Fioravanti back in 2008. Mickey Gall is terrible. I got Michael Chiesa here. I mean, unless he gets cut badly, which has happened to him in the past.
Chiesa should win this, but he has made dumb mistakes in the past.
Well, he's also cuttable. I mean, the Lozon fight, for example, he he was coming on really strong in that fight, and then just got
Yeah.
cut open by an elbow that caused the stoppage.
But he looked, and look, it was Carlos Condit. He looked good, and he looked really good. Like he annihilated Carlos Condit.
I mean, he looked good in the Pettis fight before the loss, and he struggled with the weight cut for that fight.
He also is a very good wrestler and grappler, and he has good submissions.
Yeah, I've got Chiesa here, and
you don't want to go. You're not rooting for Diego.
I have never rooted for Diego Sanchez.
Oh, come on.
Never.
He could go 3-0 here.
It's possible. Crazier things have happened.
Lifetime.
Look, he'll win here. He'll say he wants another title fight.
Man, Gilbert Melendez is still fighting.
Yep.
He's still my beating heart.
And still trying his hand at featherweight. You know, if you want, this might be a bit of a throwback, but I wouldn't hate a rematch between Melendez and Sanchez. But they're now just such polar opposite weight classes. It's probably not. It's not
Melendez
really going to happen.
Not want to fight since that fight with Sanchez in October 2013.
Spent a lot of time on the shelf too. I mean, he had a long layoff.
Plus he had. How long did he get for the metabolites?
About a year. I think that was pre-USADA.
I think that was just before or just after USADA, I believe.
Yeah, it might have been like after they announced it, but before it went into effect.
Right,
kind of
right. So it might have been under the old retroactive to the old rules.
Yeah, kind of like he was only out for about a year. Coming off of that loss to Jeremy Stevens, he got brutalized in that fight, man. That was a rough fight.
I feel like Melendez signed that last contract and he mentally checked out of the sport.
Yeah, I like Arnold Allen. He's a guy who I think has some pretty serious potential. He's 5-0 in the UFC, something like that. And that Makwan Amirkhani fight should not have been split. That's
I think he's going to destroy Melendez.
I think he's going to win here. Allen's one of the solid prospects in the sport right now, especially at featherweight.
Melendez was once one of the best fighters in the world.
One of the best lightweights.
That was years ago.
Oh, God.
That was years
I remember, because I can remember these discussions about him in his prime and BJ Penn in his prime. And how those two would have matched up, because that would have been a...
But the last time he was a top 5 fighter was when Anthony Pettis was champion. So...
Yeah, it's been a while. Next up, this was supposed to be Marlon Vera against Sean O'Malley, but Sean O'Malley with more drug test issues. Surprise, surprise.
Is fighting to be decided.
I think I have a new listing for this, actually.
Who's fighting now?
This might be a joke because I'm on Wiki. He's listed as fighting Olaf Sacco. So again, this might be a joke that I'm just not aware of.
Mr. Sacco?
I don't know. I don't know if Mr. Sacco has a first name other than
I wonder
Mr.
what McFoley thinks of this fighter.
They're going to sue him for gimmick infringement. Let me see here. Let me check Tapology. That's usually a better... Yeah, that doesn't have... Okay, so at the moment, they're still at a minimum indicating, and there's been no official removing of him, of Vera from the card.
So they're still trying to get him a fight.
And I feel pretty comfortable picking Vera in the dark against a lot of people. His record does not reflect kind of how good he is. I mean, he's
decent, on a winning streak.
On a 3-fight winning streak.
Has 8 wins in the UFC, so...
I mean, his last 2 losses were to Douglas Silva de Andrade and John Lineker, and those are pretty top shelf opposition.
Yeah.
So, Vera in the dark's a pretty safe pick. Women's strawweight, Claudia Gadelha.
7 wins in the UFC, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, next up we have Gadelha versus Randa Marcos. Poor Gadelha, man. Just not. I don't know what it is. Whether it's the constant weight cutting, but she has not been on a good run lately.
I mean, she lost 1 fight.
Yeah, but she barely got by Esparza, and then before that she got brutalized by Jessica Andrade.
Well, These are some of the.
I mean, again, Andrade, current champion. Andrade, fair enough.
These are some of the tougher women of the division.
But, and man, she just did not look all that good against Esparza, and then Ansaroff just kind of ran her around in circles.
Well.
Anyway, she's fighting Randa Marcos.
Randa Marcos is not going to win this fight.
Randa Marcos, who has perpetually gone win-loss, 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 with the odd draw thrown in there during her UFC run. I don't know, man.
Randa Marcos has only done just well enough to stay in the UFC. To me, she's not a UFC caliber fighter.
I can see the argument, but she also can at least fight for all 3 rounds.
Not that good, though.
Whereas Gadelha has about 7 minutes.
Even that fight with Carla Esparza, like, it... I'm not saying it was a fluke, but, like... I mean, she's gone win-loss, win-loss since the draw to Rodriguez. Ever since she debuted in the UFC in 2014. To me, that's not a good record, Robert. I'm sorry.
No, it's not great.
Because the opposition, let's see. Some of them are decent opponents, but look, Jessica Panay, Carolina Kovalevich, decent opponent. Courtney Casey, Alexa Grasso, Nina Ansara. What would you consider Nina Ansara?
I don't know. I have a hard time getting a handle on Ansaroff because she's clearly skilled.
Her record is 9-6-1. It's not a very good record to me.
No, it's not.
Yeah. Picking Gadelha.
I mean, I should pick Gadelha.
Unless Gadelha just shows out of shape, having trouble with the weight cut, maybe.
I mean, even when her weight cut's on point, she still, again, only has, a round and a half of action before she gasses.
Right.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to officially make one of the dumber predictions I can make. I'm going to predict a draw.
You know what? I don't think it's a terrible pick, honestly.
I think Gadelha wins the first round, barely edges the second, and then loses a 10-8 third.
Right, fair enough.
Okay, next up, Alejandro Perez will fight Song Yadong. Turbo here is coming off that loss to Cody Stamann, excuse me. Perez had a really solid run going, actually, prior to that loss. Only had 1 loss in the UFC. Now only has 2. Beat Eddie Wineland before that. Finished Matthew Lopez. And he's got some skill. And Song Yadong is on a really solid run. He's 3-0 in the UFC. Couple of finishes. He Chinese? Yes. I couldn't remember. I should have known that just from hearing his name, but for some reason I spaced on whether or not he was Chinese or one of the other Korean guys that the UFC is kind of speculating on. This should be an action fight. These two, both guys are action fighters. I've seen more from Perez, so I'm going to lean towards him, but sleeping on Song Yadong is a pretty catastrophic error. The man has some power, especially for bantamweight. All right. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that one, actually. That's a really solid bantamweight fight. Then on to Fight Pass, where we have Edmund Shabazian and Jack Marshman. I don't know why the UFC is kind of handling Shabazian the way they are, but he gets another softer touch. And Jack Marshman is a really great regional level fighter, but a really mediocre UFC fighter. Then at welterweight, Ismail Narudiev will fight Chance Rencounter. Narudiev's fought in the UFC before. I'd be willing to bet I know his name. Because he's that Austrian guy. Yeah, he had that really great win over Michel Prazeres in his UFC debut. I go with Narudiev, actually. He impressed me a lot in that fight. And kicking everything off, Julia Avila will fight Pani Kianzad. Is this Avila's UFC debut? She's 6-1. I think it is. Coming in, she had one fight in Invicta. Kianzad has really struggled in the UFC. Well, she got cut. Yeah, she lost to Macy Chiasson in the finale of The Ultimate Fighter and was immediately cut. Won a fight outside the UFC, is back in apparently. I'll go with Avila. The UFC seems to want to be using Kianzad as a springboard for other fighters at this point. But that's your group of prelims. So, Jeff, any other thoughts on those fights?
Nope.
Alrighty. Yeah, the main card, really solid. The rest of it's a little hit or miss on paper. So Saturday, I will have coverage of that event, assuming it doesn't all go catastrophically wrong and the whole thing get canceled. They've built in some pretty solid redundancies here, but, Conor McGregor jeopardized an entire card by throwing a dolly at a bus, so crazy stuff. But Saturday, we'll have coverage of that in the MMA Zone of 411 Mania, so stop by, say hello. Always appreciated. All right, I think the big thing I wanted to talk about as far as news goes, really slow news week, but the UFC has announced the majority of the fights for UFC on ESPN 5. This will take place in Newark, New Jersey on August 3rd. Your main event, I believe still interim welterweight champion Colby Covington, or did they actually strip him of that? I can't remember specifically. I think they did officially.
Yeah, they did strip him. Okay. They stripped him when I think they booked Woodley versus Till, as I recall.
Usman. I think it was the Usman fight when they did it.
I think he was stripped even before. He just kept calling himself champ, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
Also, Covington's last fight was over a year ago.
Yeah, and he will be meeting former champion Robbie Lawler in the main event. Relevant fight.
I don't get, but I mean, okay.
If Robbie Lawler still wants to fight, what else are you going to do?
I don't get why Covington is taking this fight after everything he's done.
A few people have made some noise that he needs the money.
I can kind of buy that, but if that was the case, why not accept the fight? Why didn't he accept the fight with Usman earlier this year?
He had some kind of surgery that prevented him from
being
medically clear. I don't know. I'd have to double check the timeline. Did
you need that surgery, or was it like an elective surgery?
I don't know. I don't know how you'd qualify one thing over the other necessarily, because different insurance companies will qualify stuff differently.
I once heard that Cormier needs most of his, what is it, ACL?
He's got like one knee, that is pretty torn up.
But his doctor basically said you only have, even though it's this bad, you only have to get it if you want it to, basically.
Oh, almost all knee surgeries, until you're talking about full-blown replacements, can be categorized as electives.
Right.
Depending on your insurance company.
But,
kind of thing.
I once read that Cormier's ACL was 3/4 of the way gone, basically.
Wouldn't surprise me.
But look, my point is he continued fight. Even though it was that bad, he continued fighting with it, became champion in 2 divisions with it. And that's an ACL. Which, if that tears, you're out for forever.
Maybe not. The thing about a torn ACL is once it's torn, it's just torn.
Right.
Rey Mysterio's, one of his knees is just, it won't even fully extend or retract.
Right.
And just, he knows he needs it replaced, but he won't do it until he's done wrestling.
Who do you favor in this fight at this point?
Oh, geez. At this point? Lawler has a pretty good track record of dealing with guys like Covington, but...
Except Ben Askren.
Sure. But, even then,
the
number of people that he would have finished with that slam and punches is a really high number. Ben Askren is incredibly tough.
I'm picking Covington because chaos.
Yeah, that's kind of why. Like,
Uzdemir versus Ilir Latifi, whatever.
Jim Miller and Clay Guida are going to fight, two old men, but
You
they've
don't
never
know your
never fought
UFC
before.
Your UFC sort of legends fight.
I kind of like Miller there actually, but I'm probably going to feel stupid about that later. Yeah, the rest of that card, we don't have a bout order yet, but oh god, why?
Oh,
Sorry.
Shevchenko versus Pudilova.
Yeah, Antonina Shevchenko and Lucy Pudilova.
Hey. That's Shevchenko's sister.
Yeah. Yeah.
Earl Mearshart is still in the UFC.
I mean, he wins enough to stick around.
Yeah.
The one that surprises me is Kennedy and Chukwu because, good God, I remember his fight with Paul Craig. It was terrible. He was terrible.
It's not the most enticing card.
It's really not. Like going down the rest of this, Ramazan Emeev and Claudio Silva is not a bad fight.
It's not even that top heavy.
No.
Because look, nothing against Covington. He talks a good game. He's not the most.
He's not a proven box office commodity.
Well, the other thing, he's not the most entertaining fighter, shall we say? And I think you would agree with that, Robert.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And Lawler has also been very kind of not great lately. I kind of feel like Lawler's kind of hitting a wall. And look,
well, I mean, given as many years and as many miles as that guy has in the sport,
he's 30. He's 37 years old. He's not a young man.
Well, and geez, when did he start fighting? Like Lawler started in 2001.
Yeah,
he's been fighting for 18 years.
Been fighting, and look, I'm not saying he needs to retire, but I think he needs to start thinking about his exit strategy, at the very least.
At a minimum, yeah. So anyway, yeah, you can find again the full fights that have been announced. We don't have a bout order set up yet from the UFC, but
first fight in the UFC was the year the first Spider-Man movie came out, same month and year.
Ugh, now I feel old.
The first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, not even.
I knew what you meant. I feel old now. Thank you.
Well, we're all old.
Also true. Let's see. The UFC 240 got a few other fights announced for it. The main event for that is Holloway and Edgar. But Chris Cyborg, the last fight on her UFC contract, will take that place there. She's fighting Felicia Spencer.
Holloway and Edgar, please don't get hurt this time.
Yeah, that would be nice.
If either of them get hurt, I'm going to be very angry. That's all I'll say. I'll throw a table.
Fair enough.
Not at someone. I'll throw it at the air. How does that sound?
Well, you're guaranteed to make contact.
Because like this fight is sort of getting to be like a Ferguson Habib situation, right?
Yeah, they've only tried it, I think, twice.
Has it only been twice?
They might have only tried it the one time, actually. I'd have to double check.
I feel like they've matched up at least twice.
I know it's been talked about a lot.
This is the third time.
Okay, so third.
Fairly positive. This is the third time.
Yeah, so this is the third.
If it were to fall apart after 3 times, I would be furious.
I don't hate the fight, but I'm not emotionally invested in it.
Cyborg is fighting Felicia Spencer, who beat Megan Anderson in her last fight.
Yeah, again, this is not a great card. Oliver,
I guess they're giving Cyborg maybe a hopeful gimme before a rematch with Amanda, maybe.
Well, this is the last fight on Cyborg's contract, so.
Maybe she'll go to.
Either that or they're ushering her out the door.
We'll see.
Olivier Aubin-Mercier and Arman Sarukian might be fun. Sarukian had a surprisingly good performance in his debut. I think he lost the fight.
And I feel like Aubin-Mercier is like a pretty decent fighter, not a world beater.
Yeah, he's he's on a 2-fight losing streak, so he needs to kind of get that sorted out. Here. But I mean, other than that,
Eric Koch is on this card. Oh my God.
New breed, Eric Koch.
He fought last year, but that was almost a year and a half ago at this point.
When Bobby Green just kind of styled on him.
Yep.
He's trying his hand at welterweight this time around. I mean, really, the next best fight on this card after I think the top two is probably Alexandre Pantoja and Deiveson Figueiredo.
Yeah.
Which is going to see the loser cut almost certainly. I mean, both guys are coming off of losses, which is a rare thing to stick around in the UFC at this point. Pantoja won.
Koch was matched up to fight Jose Aldo for the featherweight title.
That was going to be a thing. I remember that. Never happened, and he never recovered. Let's
He won the fight, but man, it's got to suck.
Yeah. I think that's it as far as major fight announcements that have come out over the last little bit. There's still a bunch of events in October that we don't have locations or venues for. Like almost all of October, actually.
Here's something interesting. Gastelum, they're looking at Jack Hermanson in November. Not officially yet, though.
Gastelum did post recently that he's fully healthy again after that war with Adesanya.
Yeah.
Good lord, that fight. But he's going to be looking to get something else in this year. And, he and Hermanson would be a fine number one contenders fight. I mean, Hermanson coming off of the win over Jacare.
Maybe not number one contenders, but it's a high level fight for the division.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. What else do we have here? France, the country will finally legalize MMA. It's been illegal.
It took less time for New York to happen.
Yeah.
There was a time where I thought it was never going to happen with New York.
It was inevitable. It just was going to take forever. France apparently voted on that over the last week, and in 2020 it will be legal in their country to host MMA events. So, yay, good for them.
So, maybe they'll give Ngannou his title shot in France.
That would be something. All right, the last thing I have here is Jose Aldo has apparently inked a new contract with the UFC.
According to Dana White.
True.
Is this official?
I think that's what we have. I'd have to double check, but Dana doesn't usually say they've something that legally binding in public if he doesn't have reason to believe. When I heard that,
I was like, "What?"
I'm a little surprised because Aldo was talking about retiring, but it could have been public negotiation too. So
it wasn't the first time.
Also true. So Aldo's apparently inked a new deal, and you know what? I love watching Jose Aldo fight. So
going to soccer before. He's been at odds with the UFC before and talked about retiring, so he's had a couple things like this.
And a contract with the UFC is surprisingly not all that valuable in some respects because just because the UFC can cut you basically whenever for whatever reason.
For what? Like that's it's just hard for me to wrap my head around when he was talking about retirement and was apparently at one point happy with what he was getting paid. And then the UFC turns around and re-ups him. It had to have been a significant it had to have been really significant, real money, right?
Or some other kind of consideration that we're not aware of that he really wanted.
Not money, but I mean, for him to, because this is, 8 fights, that could be several years, Robert.
I would be surprised if he fights all 8 before he retires or he gets cut.
If hypothetically he does, and then.
Yeah, that's several years. That's another 5 years.
I'm just trying to wrap my head around why you would do that. It had to have been. And then, from the UFC's part, do you want to even make the play to keep Jose Aldo for some real borderline FU money? If you're Dana White, do you want to do that, Robert? A guy who's been talking about retiring and whose best days are probably behind him.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know, but the
If you,
UFC also values Brazil as a market.
I know this is what if, and I know this is hypothetical, but if you're Dana White, do you want to re-up Jose Aldo for big time money? If it is big time money for 8 fights.
If he's going to continue fighting, and I value the Brazilian market, and I know that the Brazilian market is cool right now because they haven't had someone really to catch fire. Yeah, I can see the investment paying off.
Okay.
Again, like there might be a specific dollar amount that I wouldn't take.
Now look, I can understand that if the numbers are there, and someone's like, and someone in the financial department's like, this is how well Aldo does for us in Brazil, and we don't have anyone else quite as good as that right now. I can kind of see that, why that decision would. But it's even taking all that into account, Robert, is still gobsmacking, and I think you would agree.
I thought he was on his way out when he said it. I expected him to be done. This was a little bit surprising when the news came out.
He lost the title. He rematched for the title. He lost both those fights. He seemed content.
Yeah, when he said, I'm going to have my last 3 fights this year in Brazil and then be done.
And he was, I don't know.
Made sense to me.
And look, he was doing well. Other than, I
mean, he lost to Volkanovski, but yeah. I mean, he beat Stevens, and then
maybe he wasn't happy. Maybe he wasn't happy with losing that fight to Volkanovski because he didn't get finished.
But he also pretty clearly lost. So
he didn't do. Maybe he felt disappointed with that, and he doesn't want.
Well, I think he was still planning on one more after that. It was going to be like Moicano, Volkanovski, and then a third one on the November card was going to be his last.
Look, Moicano and Stevens were top contenders when they fought.
Yep. And he done shut them both down violently.
Yeah. The Stevens fight was his first.
That was his first stoppage since I think the Korean Zombie fight.
Yeah. And that was not that great of a stoppage.
I don't know. I always get a perverse pleasure out of watching him kick Jung's shoulder after it's separated.
Okay.
Because I'm weird like that.
Well, so yeah, it's true. He might not fight all those fights, but we'll see.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if it's full on 8, but he's even sticking around through 2000. After 19 is a little bit surprising to me.
I mean, it's surprising.
Okay. What else? Is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
Nope.
Alrighty then.
Another thing.
Okay, then let's get into plugs here. So you've been off for a couple of weeks. Yeah, I imagine you have a fair bit to mention to the listeners. So what would you like to plug?
Spider-Man Far From Home. That review is up right now. You don't have to wait until Tuesday. You can go to 411mania.com/movies and check out my official review of Spider-Man Far From Home. Rough first half in that film, Robert. So you haven't seen it yet. It's a rough first half.
I have not yet seen it, no.
I enjoyed the second half a little bit more. I don't know how you feel about Homecoming.
I was okay with it. I thought it was largely saved by both Tom Holland and Michael Keaton primarily.
I'm kind of very open to the idea of a new director coming on to Spider-Man right now if we get a third movie. I really wouldn't mind it at this point.
Is it the same director from the first movie?
It is, John Watts.
Okay. Even just after Homecoming, I would have been okay. I would have been right there.
I kind of want a new director, new writers to try their hands at Peter and Spider-Man. But overall, it was decent. I don't know how you feel about Captain Marvel, but kind of on that level to me.
I really did not care for Captain Marvel.
Well, yeah. So, and that's also fun too. So check that out. Also check out my review of Toy Story 4, which I thought was wonderful. I know you didn't care for it, but I loved it.
I didn't care for it on a personal level. On a technical level, I don't have a whole lot of complaints about the filmmaking.
Okay. And I was very skeptical going in about this. So check that out. Check out my columns, my previews from E3. And next up will be maybe a little bit from Anime Expo. And then after that is Comic-Con. So Also, for my podcast, for my 411 Wrestling podcast, most recently was first Ethan Page, which is up now on the YouTube channel, 411 Mania. So check that out, everybody.
All right, as for me, it should be relatively straightforward. Last week, Mark Radulich, Alexis Hayne, and I reviewed Toy Story 4. So you can listen to us talk about that, the positives, the negatives, so on and so forth. This week, I'm still hoping for a last-minute reprieve from having to watch Jessica Jones Season 3. But the plan right now is for Mark and I to review that. Again, I didn't enjoy Season 1 all that much, but I knew it, but I could very easily see the quality of Season 1. Season 2, just what a mess. What an absolute mess. So we'll see about that, but be on the lookout for it. Mark and I talking about that. So, and then Saturday, of course, UFC 239. And next week, we'll be back here to review UFC 239 and to preview... previewing one of just the worst cards. Just one of the... It's a terrible card in so many ways. Fight Night 155, the UFC on ESPN Plus 13. Jermaine Durandamy versus Aspen Ladd as your main event. The return of former flyweight champion Nico Montano, now up at bantamweight because the weight cut was a big deal for her. Uriah Faber coming out of retirement. It's a bit of a ho-hum card, quite frankly. It's a lot of the Sacramento guys getting a lot of fights. They're like, hey, please win this fight. But we'll give you a full rundown next week, and we'll talk about whatever fallout there is from UFC 239, assuming the card holds together, because International Fight Week has had some major fall apart for the main or co-main on like every year for the past 3 or 4 years. It's kind of a tradition. So, and both John and Amanda Nunes have had last-minute issues in the past. Now watch it be, Santos, just because bucking the trend. But we'll be back next week to give you a review, a preview, and all the news of the week as we normally do. Until next time, I think that's it for everyone else. So on behalf of Jeff, I am Robert. Thank you also very much for listening. Stay safe out there. And please continue to be well, be safe, and behave.